That's, hi, everyone. It's a pleasure. It's an honor. It's a privilege to be here. As Vitaly so lovingly mentioned, I'm TEJAS Kumar, and I am a developer relations consultant. So I get the privilege of working with a number of developer-oriented companies to figure out what DevRel is for them and come up with some strategy and then implement it if they so choose or if they so need. And in keeping with that, I tend to work with a bunch of different types of companies, so database companies, API companies, whatever, and kind of have a good ear to the ground on what's going on. That's kind of my whole business, is just kind of paying attention to the trends, and the trends have been AI. I mean, ChatGPT kind of I think it qualifies as revolutionary technology. Kind of just appeared. I think it was October, November last year, and then like it's everywhere now. And as you've probably seen in Google I/O and other events, AI, 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 right? Smashing meets AI. And with that, I wanted to weave together existing technologies that maybe aren't as hyped as AI at the moment, and combine them with AI, kind of like the other speakers have been doing, to show us some real applications. And indeed, that's what I will do today. The plan is to give you something you can take with you and maybe not use at work, or maybe do use at work, I don't know, but to use nonetheless. What we're going to do is we're going to dive into two browser APIs that are supported, I believe, in Chrome and Chromium-based browsers, and adoption is increasing in other browsers, although your mileage may vary. But we're going to take some native browser APIs, specifically the speech recognition API, and the speech synthesis API. So the recognition recognizes, the synthesis synthesizes. And we're going to combine these with OpenAI's API. And we could combine them with other large language models too via something like LangChain. But for the sake of time, we'll just stick with OpenAI's Chat GPT Turbo 3.5 model, and create exactly what the title says. This is literally what the title says. We're creating a voice-activated virtual assistant. And just for fun, we'll call it Jarvis and do the Iron Man thing. Because believe it or not, OpenAI's ChatGPT knows how to impersonate Jarvis, and it literally calls me Tony and everything. So I don't have slides, but what I do have is a computer and code. So without further ado, let's just write some code. I'm about to share my screen, and you'll probably see StreamYard initially. Just go with it, and maybe we can cut it out if we edit it later. But I do need to share my entire screen because it's a pretty involved thing. Okay, so not to alarm anyone, but here we go, and I'll quickly switch to OpenAI. Okay, so what do we have? We have a browser. So we've got Chrome. It says the site can't be reached, and we've got Visual Studio Code, and this is kind of where we're going to be camping out side by side. In Visual Studio Code, we've got an index.tsx. I prefer TypeScript, but you could do this in JavaScript, and index.html, both of which are literally empty. HTML just has some boilerplate and the body tag with a reference to the TSX file. That's literally it. If we reload, we have a blank page and a bunch of warnings. So what I'm going to do off the bat is hide warnings and things from the console, because that's not really why we're here. I'm going to hide warnings, info, all this dev server stuff. Okay, this is cleaner. And now we're going to talk to the computer and have it listen to us. So to do that, we're going to do recognizer, and we'll do a new, that's actually wrong. This is where AI is confidently wrong. This is not going to work. If I save this, it's going to show us an error. Let's bring back errors. It's going to say speech recognizer is not defined. So what we need is speech recognition, but it's still going to say speech recognition is not defined. And this is because we have a browser, a vendor prefix. So this isn't supported in all browsers. Chromium uses an engine, I believe, called Blink. I could be wrong, but regardless, we prefix this with WebKit, which is the Safari engine, and it works, right? So we've instantiated an instance of speech recognition. We have a recognizer. What can we do with it? Now, because this is a non-standard API across all browsers, we're going to have issues with TypeScript, but we'll just ignore them as we do. And what do we want to do? We want to start recognizing speech. And so to do that, we'll just do recognizer.start. Boom. And now what you'll see is in my Chrome, in the tab, you'll see a nice red dot, because it's, you see this over here, you see the computer is listening, and it stopped, and then nothing happened. And what we need to do is kind of hook into the result event and explore the results. Let's do that. So we'll do recognizer. Oh, wow. Copilot's actually right this time. We can just do this for now. Ideally, we add event listener, and I'm happy to, if you have a question about why add event listener is maybe better than just adding a method, we can talk about that. But we'll do this. Hello, welcome to something, something, something. And nothing happened. That's a bit of a shame. Let's let's try it again. We'll just console log b. Oh wow, this actually should be accurate. Let's just console log and see if it hears anything. I exist. Okay, and we'll save. Hello, this is a test of my speech recognition thing. I hid console things, I think. There we go. I exist, and it says, hello, this is a test of my... Let's get rid of these warnings, but we have everything else. Great. So we already are recognizing text. This uses in Chromium something that I suspect talks to Google under the hood. So again, time to be sensitive to what you're sharing and with whom. But I trust that you will do your due diligence as needed. The purpose of this talk is to play a little bit and explore these APIs and their implications in the context of AI. Okay. So, okay, we're getting text. What do we do with this text? What we want to do is add them to a queue of messages that maintain context that ChatGPT can be aware of and have a real honest-to-goodness conversation. And to do that, we'll have an array, messages, and it's just an empty array. And to make TypeScript happy, we'll say it's an array of strings. Actually, let's do one step further. It's objects with a type that's a string and a content that's a string. And we'll say this structure is a message. So we'll just do that. And this is just TypeScript. You don't need this in JavaScript, but just being safe. All right, this is good. So we get the transcript, and this looks good. This is, by the way, the first take or the first guess of what I said. And this is the first result of the first guess. That's what the 0, means. So it comes up with multiple guesses of what you said at different confidence levels and gives you an array of them. And I'm just choosing the first guess and the first result of the first guess, the first transcript of the first guess. Okay, that's what this means. So there, as I said, there are many results with varying confidence. We just usually want the top one. So that's what's happening here. Great. So now that we have the result, what we'll do is we'll const result. And we'll push that into the array. So we'll say messages.push. And this is why TypeScript is awesome, because it knows, or it should know, that result is a string. And it just gives us this. This is fantastic. You might be wondering what type is, and this will become more clear as we start using OpenAI. So now we have this array of messages. Let's just console log one more time to make sure it is what we expect it to be. So we'll console log messages. And see what's happening. So I'll save. Hello, sometimes people think I'm Vitaly, but I'm actually my own person. Okay, so there's a array type user, and this is absolutely perfect. So it's quite accurate as well. Sometimes people think I've Italy. Well, whatever. But I'm actually my own person. Okay, well, it kind of works. I've Italy, I'll forgive that. But so far, so good. Now we've got to send this to OpenAI. So let's create a function called ask, which is an async function. And we won't do that. In fact, we'll kind of break function purity a little bit and have a side effect that talks to messages out here. This is probably not a best practice, but this is fine for the sake of the demo. So now what we need to do is get an OpenAI API key and actually talk to OpenAI. To do that, we'll check out the API reference from OpenAI. So there's this chat completion API, which is you just make a request to this endpoint, that's post, and you include this body. So let's just do that. So I'm just going to copy this URL, go back here, and say return, await, fetch, boom. Method post. They need some headers to be included. So content type is one of them, and an authorization with my token. And we'll get to that in a second. So authorization is bearer. And let's just generate an API key. Now, please don't copy this and run up my bill. You can't copy it probably. So anyway, so we've got an API key. I'll revoke it after the session. It's fine. And next, we need to include the messages with them. So we'll do body json.stringify, and we'll see what it expects. And this is well documented. So it expects a model and an array of messages. So we'll just copy this payload here and paste it in, right? And this fits. Now notice the messages we're sending is a system message and other messages. And the system message is interesting because this tells ChatGPT who it is. And this is the one probably used in the ChatGPT app, but you could give it an identity statement that is literally whatever you want. You could be, you are a horrible, angry pirate who abuses people, and within its parameters of RLHF, within its parameters of being kind, it will do its best to be a pirate that hates people, right? So you could tell it who it is. In this case, we're going to be like, you are Jarvis, wow, I can't spell, personal assistant to Tony Stark. Your answers are as short as possible, and you are speaking to Iron Man Tony Stark himself. Okay, why not? So this is messages. In fact, what I'm going to do is turn my initial messages array into that. We'll just change this to a role here, and we'll just send that. And so now we have this ask function, and this is going to return some stuff. So we'll serialize what it returns to JSON, and then we'll console log its response for now. We can do other stuff. Actually, we won't do that here. We can do other stuff with this as needed. Okay. Lastly, before we ask, we need to push into messages, which we're kind of doing here. So role is not system, which is an identity giver, but it's a user. In this case, user is Tony. Okay. And so we're pushing messages, and now we'll ask it. So we'll await ask. And we won't just, we'll turn this into an async function. We won't just await ask, but we'll console log whatever ask gives us. Okay. And now let's go check the browser and see what's up. So I'll save this. I need to make a suit of gold and iron, and it needs to be cool. Right, so the API gave us this, which is a bunch of stuff. In here is choices, the first choice, message, content. And the content is ChatGPT's response. I suggest incorporating a sleek design with advanced weapon and flight capabilities, the use of lightweight something. I can't scroll. The use of lightweight materials and advanced power sources can enhance its overall cool factor. Wow, that's amazing. So what I want to pull out from here is response.choices 0 message content. Okay, so instead of console log, we'll .then and we'll return that. So we'll return our choices 0 message content. This should give us what we want. And so far everything looks good. Let's try this again. I'm giving a talk at a conference and I need to think of something funny to say. Okay, this is perfect. How about, why did the computer go to the doctor? Because it had a virus. Hey! Laughing emojis. So it works. It's good. Now we just need to have it speak the words for us. And then we're at gold. And notice, this didn't take a lot of time, thanks to the awesome declarative web APIs. Last thing we need is to have it speak. We need speech synthesis. But before that, we need to actually push its answer onto the context stack. So we'll say const answer is whatever it returns. And we'll messages.push. This time, role is assistant. And the content is the answer. Okay. Now, the last thing we need to do is synthesize speech, have it speak to us. To do that, we will create a function called speak. Actually, we'll do this above the event listener. Text string is fine. And we'll just let Copilot write this for us. Why not? So we're creating a new speech synthesis utterance and giving it the text to speak. We're setting the language. We actually don't need to set the language, but we can set the voice to be a very Jarvis-y voice. And it's usually the first one. No surprises, the first one is a white male British person voice, which we kind of need to fix if you think about it. But anyway, that's the voice we want, and we're going to have it speak. Okay. Let's now call the speak. Whoa, there's a fly. Let's call the speak. Sorry, my window's open and there's insects. Let's call the speak function and see what happens. Okay. And we'll also just console log the answer just to be sure it's working. Save. I'm speaking at a conference and I need to go to downtown in like 5 minutes. How do I fly there?
You can use the Mark 47 armor suit to fly to downtown. It is at your disposal.
Woo! Okay, that's fantastic. Look, we did it. The problem is we can't have a conversation, right? It's not listening anymore. So what I want is I talk, you talk, I talk, you talk, I talk, you talk, until I close the tab. In fact, I'm going to open a new tab so I can close this one. And let's go about blank so I don't share with you my browser history. Anyway, this is working good. So what we need now is a way for Jarvis to say, okay, I'm done speaking, start listening again. To do that, instead of returning nothing from this function, we will return a promise. So we'll return a new promise. And in JavaScript, promises can resolve or reject. We're not going to handle error cases because we're pirates and it's a demo, but you should. And if you wanted to, you get a reject thing here, and you literally just, and you know what, let's handle it. Why not? So we'll do try and catch error. And if you fail, we just reject the promise. Look at that. We're handling an error. Fantastic. Okay, this is good. But now we need to resolve the promise after the speech is over. So to do that, we'll do something like utterance dot add event listener end. And when the utterance has done speaking, we'll just wait a second. So we'll turn this into something async, and we'll await a very small amount of time because there is some buffer here, okay? So this is literally, so we're awaiting a new promise that resolves. Keep in mind, the first argument here is resolve. So it resolves after a second. So we'll wait a second, and then we'll start listening again. To start listening, we call recognizer.start, okay? And then recognizer.start, again, gets this result, and the whole cycle repeats. So now we've essentially created a listening loop. This should kind of be all we need. But let's fix this by not starting the recognition here in the speak function, because that's mixing concerns. We ideally want speak and listen to be separate. So we'll await speak here, and we'll start listening once speak is done, exactly like this. The last thing we need to do is, instead of awaiting this new promise and resolving, we need to resolve here. So we'll resolve the promise here. What are you complaining about? An argument for result, it's undefined. What? Void. Okay, cool. 0. Okay, nice. So now we're saying, wait a second, and then resolve the promise, and then do whatever's next. So this should ideally work, and we're going to have a long conversation with our own Jarvis. I have amnesia. What's my name?
Sorry, I am not programmed to have access to personal information like names.
Are you gonna? So, but like, I made you. You should know me.
As an AI language model, while I can remember our conversation history, I do not have the capability to store personal information or recognize individuals. Therefore, I apologize if I cannot directly address you by your name.
Who is the brilliant scientist who created Jarvis?
In the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Jarvis was created by Tony Stark, the alter ego of Iron Man, as an artificial intelligence program to assist him in various tasks.
Okay, but this isn't the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Jarvis. This is real life. Who made you?
I was developed by a team of OpenAI developers and researchers using state-of-the-art AI technology, including natural language processing and machine learning.
Cool. Now I need to close the tab, else we're going to have, it's just going to keep responding and cutting me off. But you get the idea. So what we did, to recap, was we used speech recognition to turn speech to text. We then we just literally took that text, sent it to OpenAI's API, and then we synthesized it and spoke back. Now, you might be wondering, wow, that's really awesome. And indeed it is. Like, you can make your own thing. You could then also use something like LangChain to chain it and have, you know, your smart home be controlled by your little JavaScript app or something. There's many applications to this. I want to highlight, just as we wrap up, and indeed, I think it was 20 minutes. Correct me if I'm wrong. But I want to wrap up by sharing one very cool use case of this that I recently found, which is, I'll put a link maybe in the collaborative doc after my session. There was somebody who turned writing articles into a very nice flow, where they had a Notion or a Google Doc style document, and they had headings, and they didn't actually say much. They said, write an outline for an article about rural versus urban population. And then it produced an outline. And then next thing, expand on the introduction. And it did. The next thing was, okay, now address this concern. So they basically communicated and had the AI assistant write the thing based on their vocal cues. And so you can literally just sit here and orchestrate and dictate what you want, and it just does the job. This unlocks those kinds of use cases where oftentimes your creativity is somewhat limited, right, by being in front of just a keyboard and in a certain environment. In fact, there's scientific literature around something called the cathedral effect. You're welcome to Google that. I'll also maybe put a link in the discussion document. But the cathedral effect is a fascinating study where they found in a large group of people that when they were in a sort of finite roofed area, so for example, if there was a ceiling above them, creativity was somewhat limited. Versus when they went outside and, well, the highest ceiling, I guess, is the sky, people tended to be more creative and think more freely. And I think with a voice activated assistant, you're kind of freer to be creative without, being limited by a keyboard and so on. Anyway, a little bit of science and philosophy there, but generally the hope is we covered some web APIs, some JavaScript APIs, and some ways you can tie AI together with JavaScript to have a great experience and build a useful tool for yourself. And with that, I want to say thank you so much for having me. I hope this has been fun, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you so much, Tejas. Wow, that was fast, and it was also quite impressive, like what we can do with just a couple of APIs in the browser today. It's unbelievable. I think, like, just to the point that you mentioned about cathedral effect, I think that there's a lot of truth to it. Because when you think about, like, typically when you're dealing with these prompts, you start typing and then, okay, here we go. Now I have to type again, and okay, I'm going to type again. And then, sometimes you have these bubbles which help you refine. But if you could freely sit and think, okay, let's talk, let's have a conversation, dear, let's see what we can do. There is a lot of opportunities here, I think. So that's pretty interesting. One question that I wanted to ask you, which is maybe not necessarily related to JavaScript APIs, but it's been interesting because just a couple of weeks ago, I stumbled upon this article, which basically wrote, there was an article about a few American banks. I think it was Wells Fargo, if I'm not mistaken, but maybe I'm wrong. Where basically they opened 500 positions for software engineers specifically focused on AI. And that kind of really brought me to question about, we always try to get better at what we do, right? We always try to learn new things, and we kind of look into what React can do, we look into Vue can do, we look at all these things that are happening in the JavaScript world as well. Do you think that at this point today, if you want to be software engineer, JavaScript developer, front-end engineer, whatever you want to call it, you probably need to tap at least a little bit into AI because it's probably going to be shaping the future? Or can we kind of move along comfortably writing JavaScript and, every now and again, if we need to, we can look into AI? What's your take on this?
Yeah, that's a really good question. There was a co-presenter that kind of we didn't even notice, at least I didn't notice in my talk, which was GitHub Copilot, literally like writing the code for me in many instances. And I do indeed think it's going to be this thing that is all pervasive if it isn't already. It's going to be everywhere. And I think it is important to tap into AI, even if a little bit, to stay kind of relevant. I think it's a bit murky right now, right? Because there's a lot of products that are adding AI features just because AI is cool and because it's trendy. And I think that may die down a little bit. But I think it cannot be avoided. It is a direction that we've committed to. And I think it's very important to be aware of how things work. Now, I feel a lot of personal imposter syndrome around this, right? Because I've worked as a front-end engineer, a back-end engineer, a DevOps engineer, a database engineer, but never a data scientist or a data analyst or a data engineer. And I feel like there is a lot of mathematics and things, if you want to get into the details there, that are a little bit esoteric to the general public. But I think in as much as one is able, it's definitely worth exploring as much as they can and getting as deep as they can in the world of machine learning, data science, and AI.
Right. That's kind of similar things to me as well, because I always feel like, oh my God, I have no idea what is going on there. I mean, we spoke about it already, kind of AI being a bit of a magic black box. Nobody really understands how exactly that works, how it makes all these connections. And we're programming it with, who knows what the consequences of that will be and the impact. And this kind of ties in nicely in the next talk. But maybe before we go there, like kind of really, again, looking back and maybe going a little bit deeper into the notion of hiring and jobs and skills, right? I think at some point we will be, it's probably going to be the case that everybody who is working in front end in JavaScript at some point will have a project which relates to AI. So it's just beneficial to know at least a little bit ins and outs. And this is why it's a very good idea, dear friends, joining us here in this meetup to tap into like just what is going on there as well. But
Yeah.
we also see that there is this wave of, hiring freezes and layoffs and all of that. And it's kind of interesting for me to see. I mean, I know it's a bit of an off topic, but on the one hand, we see these companies really freezing. Like, oh, no, we're not hiring yet, at least maybe, unless it's maybe startups or so, right? But on the other hand, we have these huge openings for everything AI, like huge. So do you think like in some way this AI, I don't know, mysterious AI effect where everybody's talking about AI will unfreeze almost that situation on the IT market and kind of bring it in dynamics again? Or do you feel like it's very separate things?
I think I'm not a future. I loved the previous speaker who said I'm not a futurist. But I think AI might hurt the IT market a little bit because, like, we just saw layouts and front ends just appear. And there's an excellent talk by my friend Laurie Voss over at Netlify, who was kind of, his whole thing is prophesying, right? Because he's a data analyst at Netlify, so he looks at thousands and thousands and thousands of package.jsons and projects deployed in Netlify and can draw like projections and conclusions. And his theory that he shared at Render ATL was things oftentimes get phased out or are due for an update over time. Things like Ruby on Rails, PHP, like they're still used, of course, but there's oftentimes they're overtaken by things like jQuery and React and so on. His theory is HTML and CSS. A lot of that work can be offloaded in a trustworthy way to AI, where we just guide instead of write all of it together, and that kind of scares me. So I think it might not unfreeze hiring and unfreeze or rather pause layoffs, but I think it might augment the way we hire for sure. I don't know how yet, but I definitely see it. I think there was also reports in the news of companies laying off massive amounts of engineers and replacing them with AI. I heard this. I don't know if it was sensationalist propaganda, but
No, I heard something around that as well. There are a couple of reports on that.
Yeah, so I think so. We might even see more layoffs, right? Because a lot of things are now more replaceable than they were, unfortunately. Or at least I can't even say that they're replaceable because there's always the human ingenuity that comes into it. But from like a capitalist point of view, I do see how they would see it as replacing people for cheaper, faster machines. So.
Right. Well, on that positive note, I would say we are going to move on to the next session, but I'm sure that we're going to see a little bit later today as well. Right. So, dear friends, please, if you can, send a round of curry and clap emoji to Tejas. Tejas, thank you so much for sharing your insights with us.